Welcome to The Courage Effect. I'm Suzanne Weller, and this is a show about growth and unleashing what's possible. You will hear inspiring stories about what courage looks like, how we navigate what's getting in our way, and the opportunities that surface when we choose courage over comfort. Let's get started. Welcome to The Courage Effect. This is Suzanne. I'm honored to have you joining me today. So my guest today, this is the first show where we have two guests, and these are two people who have actually been quite instrumental in my storytelling journey. They've been partners in both creativity and curiosity and are really some of the main reason why I am here today and why The Courage Effect exists. My guests today are Dave Nelson and Stacy Harris. They have basically woven stories separately and together. They partner both in life because they are married and in business. They created a business where they work with brands to develop audio storytelling strategies. And they honestly inspire me for so many reasons because of the work that they do, how they show up as human beings and as friends. And they are so intentional about how they approach their lives. And they're so open to experimentation at the same time. So Dave Nelson is a Seattle-based composer committed to curating music that serves as a soundtrack for life's moments. And heads up, he actually created the Courage Effect music. So I just want to make sure, Dave, that we acknowledge you for that. I love it. A big thank you. After leaving the U.S. Air Force, Dave embarked on a career combining his creativity and technical curiosity, starting with over 20 years at Microsoft, from the first generation Xbox to the development and management of content channels, including digital music and video distribution, as well as global media partner management. And Stacy Harris's passion is to guide clients to unlock their true potential and drive transformation through her coaching and consulting practice. She serves as a catalyst for growth, empowering individuals to navigate change with confidence. With 2 decades of extensive business, development, and coaching experience, Stacy ignites the fire within, fueling personal and organizational excellence. Dave and Stacy, it is such a pleasure to have you both here. Welcome to The Courage Effect.
Hello, Suzanne. How are you?
Thanks for having us. This is exciting. We're so thrilled and honored to be invited to chat with you today, and ridiculously excited that the Courage Effect is not only up and running but thriving. So well done.
Thank you. Well, thank you to both of you for being here and for being a part of making it happen. So, and of course, let's start off with the big question. So, and I'm going to pose this to you both. You can take turns in how you would like to respond. But what does courage mean to you?
Wow, courage. Well, first of all, getting on a show like this live when we're normally on the other side of the microphone. But I think for me, not so much fear-based, but to have courage, it's got to be going to do something that I'm not sure about, right? Taking a step into kind of the unknown. If everything seemed easy and was sure to work out right, I don't think I would call it courage to be stepping into things I knew were always going to happen well.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a willingness to try something, not knowing, to similar to what Dave said about knowing the outcome, but also in spite of what others may tell you should do. We get a lot of shoulds in life. And if we actually follow our gut or our heart or our passion, whatever we want to identify it as, there's a really, really good chance that it'll actually work out, even if it maybe might not seem to work out for someone else. It usually lands us where we need to be.
I love that. I love that. Well, embracing the unknown, moving away from the shoulds, because yes, we all tend to should ourselves to death. And the idea of not just, being open to the unknown, but what is actually going to uncover, what will uncover and what will surface on the other side of that. So, and I'd love for maybe one of you, I don't know, Dave, let's start with you. If you wouldn't mind sharing a story, maybe where courage was involved, where it did propel you to uncover something or maybe bubble up a success that you didn't expect.
Yeah, I think in getting ready for this show, we were talking, and I think the big one that really starts for me is many years ago, I was in the Air Force and I'm wrapping up my 4 years, and it was, time to decide, do I re-enlist and go for more, or do I get out, kind of thing. And I had just gotten to the point where I knew my job. I was really good at it, that I was doing in the Air Force. And I could see myself easily just doing a whole career and retiring through all of that. And I enjoyed it. but I still felt like it didn't allow me the creative freedom. I mean, it's very prescribed, the things that you do and don't do. But I didn't feel like I had the creative freedom to move around in the things that I was interested in. Primarily, music was kind of the main driver, and so I traded steady income and a steady job for getting out. And everyone told me music is not a good way to make a living, kind of thing. So I think that was the big step right there for me was I'm going to be courageous. I'm going to move forward and I'm going to go try to do the thing that I want to do instead of the thing that was safe and comfortable. And,
Yeah.
Looking back long term, like you just said in the intro, I've forgotten that this was the show that the music was on that you and I worked on, heard it in the intro. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's right. That's the song. So that was many years ago to take that step and go through just a lifelong journey of ending up somewhere where I'm creating music for a show for a friend of mine that's on the radio. And had I not taken that step, who knows where I would have been, could have ended up at the same place or somewhere completely different. But that was a courageous moment for me, I think, looking back.
Yeah. Did you have to deal with naysayers when you made that decision? I mean, because as you said, like, I'm going into music, which
Yeah.
is
Oh, yeah.
awesome,
No.
creative, from a creative point of view, but there's obviously the reality of, parents and other people in your lives. So I'm just curious, where did that come in?
I don't know that I don't recall my parents giving me any problems, but there was a ton of people like, Dave, you could be retired in X years and all of this stuff. And I'm like, I'm 20 something. I'm not really thinking about retiring, but I had more energy towards the passion, right? The kind of the rock star fantasy or whatever it was at the time. I still wanted to go do those things that were kind of burning in me. A lot of people like, yeah, you're never going to make money doing that. That's like, you're never going to make a living. You'll be a starving artist the whole time. Like, well, I don't want to be starving, but I do think if you're not feeding yourself, ultimately, I don't think I could have articulated at the time, but looking back now, if you're not feeding yourself at some level, you're going to starve. You're going to starve, inside, not so much your stomach or something like that. So I had a lot of people, encouraging me to do all sorts of things that I'm glad I didn't do.
Well, I love that you took that leap. And obviously it led to, 20 years at Microsoft. That's a long time. And I'm imagining too that leaving Microsoft after 20 years was probably another leap of faith.
Yeah, the steady check, all that kind of stuff. And even during that, just to be real quick, even during that journey, there's a lot of tech, but then a lot of music, a lot of creative aspects kind of percolated through that whole time. And it was, well, I'm not a musician. I'm not doing the thing I want, but I'm still kind of dabbling in it. I ended up in MSN Music and Bing Video, working with record labels and things like that. So I was still, ultimately that goal was still out there and I still was around it and kind of immersed in it. And it's just, you never know how you're going to end up doing those things. I would have never imagined that it would have been through Microsoft, for instance.
Yeah. That's great. I love that story. And what about you, Stacy? I mean, maybe I don't know if you want to share one as well. Put you on the spot.
Well, yeah, similar to Dave, especially in my early 20s, I actually started out in IT in Australia, having been born and raised there. And IT back I'm aging myself, in the 90s was very wild, wild west. And I moved to Canada on a working holiday visa, being in a part of the Commonwealth. And I knew Microsoft in the ethereal, like just very like, it's this global brand even at the time. And I said to myself, I actually want to work for Microsoft. And didn't know how, didn't know anyone. I didn't even know anyone in the Northern Hemisphere at that time. And so I was 22 years old and living in Vancouver, and saw an ad in the paper one day that said that Microsoft was having an open house on the campus in Redmond. And so I caught the train. I came down on a Saturday morning. It was doubly awesome because they were offering free breakfast. So as a starving 22-year-old, that was like, oh yeah, I'll just go for that. And so I I literally got on a train and I turned up to this place called Redmond, Washington, which at the time I might have actually thought that the White House was in Washington. So, and then I landed a job and started at the age of 23. So, coming from a small town in Australia, that was kind of a big deal.
That's a huge deal. And especially as you said, you didn't really know anybody in this hemisphere. So that makes a big difference too.
Yes. Yeah. But the bagels definitely were a good draw. So that was, that started off my bagels, entered my career at Microsoft pretty early. So.
It is interesting looking back at early professions, right? Like the things that really pulled you in, the things that were the big perks and that mattered just on the priority level, right? Like, oh my God, like free soda. Yeah. Soda. Like I remember the soda. I was like, oh, that's amazing. I was like, okay, this serves a purpose, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Maybe not so much anymore, but it did at the time. And, if someone's having an open house and they're offering free bagels, there's a good chance we'll turn up. So even at our age.
Even now, yeah.
Now I know what are the things I need to do to actually pull you in. So maybe I need to send you some bagels after we do this interview.
That'll be great.
So I know we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'd love to maybe talk a little bit about, I mean, obviously you've both made big moves in your life, big, bold moves. And I'm sure that there were some moments where you didn't necessarily either trust your gut, or maybe there were some times where things didn't necessarily go as you expected. Maybe you jumped into the unknown and it wasn't quite what you wanted. Maybe there was a do-over moment, as I like to call them. So let's take a quick break. Let's come back and maybe talk about some of the things that maybe didn't work out so well, but you learned from them in the process. So if you're listening, this is Suzanne, The Courage Effect. We will be right back.
Asking questions is better than making assumptions. Such is the premise of my show, Stacy Connects, a show about making connections through conversation. I welcome a diverse assortment of guests to chat about topics and ideas that are sometimes educational, sometimes inspirational, a little personal, and always entertaining. Every week, I draw out and befriend the elephant in the room so listeners can connect with the unexpected. Listen live Tuesdays from 3 to 4 on Alternative Talk 1150 KKNW.
Have you ever wanted to go above and beyond for your community? Volunteering for your local fire or EMS department is your opportunity. Join a family that will serve with you, always have your back, and train you to be the best version of yourself. As a volunteer, you will meet new people, learn new skills, and make a meaningful impact. Learn more at makemeafirefighter.org. That's makemeafirefighter.org.
Alternative Talk 1150. We're on your radio at 1150 a.m. We're on your HD radio at 98.9 Channel 3.
So many ways to listen.
We're on the web at 1150kknw.com. Streaming live audio and video as well as MP3 archives of many of our shows.
So many ways to listen.
And now, we're on your smartphone or tablet. Download our free app in the Apple App Store or Google Play and take Alternative Talk 1150 anywhere you go.
So many ways to listen.
Bored with the other stations, hammering away on the same old talking points? Try Alternative Talk 1150 and get some variety.
Welcome back to The Courage Effect. This is Suzanne, and I am in conversation with Stacy Harris and Dave Nelson. So, Dave, let's go back to you. When we left off, we were talking about, maybe let's have a conversation about a do-over moment. And I like to think of that as, courage is a really great thing, like, because as you said, embracing the unknown and going out there. Sometimes we do things that didn't go as planned, and that's okay. But I'd love to hear a little bit from you, maybe if you have a do-over moment, and what did you learn from it?
I'll answer that question. I don't know if my do-over moments are necessarily mistake-oriented, but I just keep thinking of different phases and eras of my life where I said, well, like for instance, getting out and doing music kind of thing. So I got out of the military because I wanted to learn music and I started studying in college. And then a couple of years in, I got a job answering phones at Microsoft and ended up on a completely different route. doing product support and all sorts of other stuff. And so music kind of took a back seat. I don't regret going that route, but at some point during that, an opportunity came up to work at MSN Music. And I thought, well, that's not quite what I imagined in terms of doing it, but I'm still involved. So let's back up and take another run at this and dive in on the business side of working with labels and distribution processes, stuff like that. And so there's a number of times, in my history where I've been able to say, this isn't quite what I expected, but I'm going to back up, take another run at it. I'm going to do another do-over. Like maybe it's not quite exactly what I thought it was going to be. And sort of embracing the opportunity as a different way of approaching the original dream kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I would say there's probably 2 or 3 or 4 different times getting out of the military, going into college, studying, and then Microsoft pops up. Then within working in Microsoft, end up working with record labels. Who would have thought that a software company be doing that? And then getting done with that, starting editing for podcasts, and then creating theme songs for shows like yours, for instance. And just there's all these instances where if I look at these new opportunities and I sort of tell myself, I guess I didn't say at the time, but now I can, I want to do that over. I could still achieve the thing that I want to do. It's not going to be exactly the way I envisioned it at first, but let's do this over again and try again to see where we end up. And just kind of taking repeated opportunities instead of saying, it's black or white. If it worked or it didn't, and if it didn't, then I'm on to doing something else kind of thing. It's never over until you give up kind of thing. So just keep moving on things, doing over.
I love that for so many reasons. And I think it's really important for us to, as you said, it doesn't mean it was a mistake because it didn't turn out how you didn't necessarily want, but it's that true desire to experiment, that true desire to be like, well, let's go again. And I would imagine that so much of creating music is about that.
Sometimes you create something for someone, they're like, that's not what I wanted. Like, oh, well, I thought it was perfect. So I guess we're gonna have to do that again. Like figure out what it was, and you end up learning things in the process. You end up I can actually save that for later, and I can redo that in another event or opportunity. So it's never a pass or fail. It's I think evolving the dream or evolving the goals that you have. Because when I went into the military, there was no such thing as music streaming, for instance. So it wasn't, well, maybe one day I'll be able to get involved in online music. Like there was no such thing. It didn't exist. So there was no job aptitude test that said, well, maybe you could do that. It was some opportunity because I thought I would be playing. And I didn't get the opportunities I needed to in order to play on a regular basis. So I ended up going into a software company. And in the middle of all of that, there's this opportunity to work with record labels. I worked with 250 indie labels and all of the majors. I had no idea I would ever be anywhere close to that kind of stuff. And the opportunities might not exist today that you will have 5 years from now. So keep moving forward on those things, I'd say.
Well, and when you were working on the music stuff at Microsoft, you were partnering with the labels of the very first label of Taylor Swift and John Legend.
Yeah.
And, you would never think that a multinational software company would be, you would find a role where you're working directly with these music labels, regardless of how big they are. Right. And so, and we have also, on the flip side of that, been in the studio with some of the most influential technical leaders on the planet. And never in a million years did we think that there would be such a crossover in what especially with what Dave has done, right? And so there's a lot of these pinch me moments where we're like, if you were to write it down on paper, no one would believe you. But here we are.
Yeah, my first time in a big, well, not my very first time, but recently, a few years ago, I'm in this gigantic multi-million-dollar studio. Not for the reason I ever thought. I'm here to interview a tech billionaire. And it isn't because of music, but all of a sudden, I guess I made it to a studio somehow. And I think if you're too rigid on the dreams, right? You want to have that childlike, I want to be an astronaut one day, right? You want to have that big dream and just be willing to say, well, that dream might not take the shape that you originally imagined. You might end up working at NASA in a different capacity, or working in the music industry in a capacity that didn't exist when you made the initial dream.
Well, and I'll jump in really quick too. One of the other things that, and with Dave's work as a composer today, post tech career and with our media business, is him getting comfortable with identifying as a composer. And it seems relatively new when he says it out loud as a descriptor for himself, but in actual fact, he's been composing for decades, just not in an official kind of full-time capacity. And so he could have been calling himself a composer this entire time, but it's just now kind of feeling comfortable in wrapping yourself around the title that he's been writing music since he was in middle school.
Yeah. Kid.
And so even in his more seasoned age, it's something that he's not new to composing. It's just new as identifying as a composer, when it's been a lifelong thing for him.
Yeah, it's been there under the surface the whole time. Yeah.
Sounds like you're getting more comfortable with wearing that hat.
I don't feel so much like a poser, more of a composer. So it's all growth. It's all growth mindset, really.
I love that. Composer, not poser. Very nice. So, and what about you, Stacy? I mean, I don't know if you have something where you want to talk about maybe, when you were going against somebody's advice, or maybe going on your own advice. I'd love to hear from you, maybe something where you took a chance and really went with your gut.
Yeah, there's a lot of times small micro instances, but the two biggest, probably pivotal or swivel moments that Dave and I now, because we don't want to evoke an eye roll with the word pivotal, so we're referring to it as a swivel, is I was in my early 20s, and it goes back to my conversation earlier about moving to Canada. I grew up in a relatively large town, small city in Australia. And there was this kind of unspoken expectation that you grew up there, you stayed there, you raised your family there, and you took nice little holidays, but you always came back. And I just always had this feeling that there was a bigger world out there. And even as a child, I was like, I'm going to live in the Disneyland castle, not because I want to be a princess, but because it just seems so magical as it is on brand for Disney. And so I had this opportunity for this working holiday visa in Canada, not knowing anyone, again, in the Northern Hemisphere. And I was going by myself. And I got a lot of, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're doing. This is mainstream internet. I think Hotmail might have been a thing back then. And so I landed in Vancouver with $600 in 2 suitcases and ill prepared. But I was 22 years old, and there was just something inside of me that was like, I have to try this. Even if it doesn't work out, I have to try this. And then the second time was the short version is that as a member of the Commonwealth, you're able to do the living and working holiday visa in a number of different countries around the world. And I was getting to a point where you age out of that eligibility. And I was at my career at Microsoft for about 7 years, and the age of 31 was looming, and that was the cutoff age for you to be able to apply for one of these visas. And so I had to decide, do I stay with my career, or do I follow my passion for travel and to just go out and explore the world for a couple of years before I truly, quote unquote, settle down? And I was single at the time, and I went to my director and I said to her, hey, I think I'm going to quit, and I need to make a decision pretty quickly. And she said, okay, just let me know. We'd hate to lose you, but I understand. I was like, great. And then I made the decision to actually continue to pursue my career. And lo and behold, she'd remembered that she'd actually moved to India for a short-term, a 2-year assignment, and came back one day for some meetings. We ended up having Thai food, and she said, hey, you want to move to India for 6 months? And by the end of lunch, I said yes. And 30 days later, I had moved to India and lived there for 6 months. In that 30 days between the Thai food and the plane leaving, I got told I was an idiot more times than I could probably ever recall. And in both instances, moving from Australia to Canada and then from the US to India, I just said to myself, if I don't try, I will regret this for the rest of my life, in spite of what other people had told me. And hands down, I've made a lot of good decisions, including marrying this guy. But those two instances are top 5 decisions that I have made in my life that I will never, ever, ever want to do over on, because I didn't listen to other people. I listened to myself.
Amazing. The bravery that goes with that. But I mean, what I'm hearing is really trusting your intuition and listening to yourself. So,
yeah, and I cried both times for like 6 weeks every day. Like, let me be very clear. And
that's part of the process.
And there were many times where I was like, this is the biggest mistake I've ever made in my entire life, just because there were moments of just sheer panic. I have made a mistake. And then just through grit and resiliency was like, I got to make the most of this, because I don't know if I'll ever get this opportunity again.
Yep. Well, and taking advantage of the opportunity when it comes. So that's what I'm hearing from both of you. And so many great points. We're about to wrap. So I just want to make sure that I'm, first of all, thanking both of you for being here and sharing some of my key takeaways from this conversation. Trusting your intuition, really looking at swivel moments, being open to potentially what's going to come up, and not being too rigid in your dreams. And because, we tend to tell those stories and think it's going to end one way. And Dave, I think, your quote, if you're not feeding yourself, then you got a problem feeding yourself in one way or another. So thank you to you both for being friends, partners in courage and creativity. And thank you for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you, Suzanne. And bravo.
Oh, pleasure. Well, keep going with what you're doing. Everybody out there, thank you for listening. Stay courageous. We will speak with you soon.